Hello, sword people. Welcome to the Sword Guy podcast. This is your host, Dr. Guy Windsor, consulting swordsman, teacher and writer. Join me for interviews with historical martial arts instructors and experts from a wide range of related disciplines as we discuss swords, history, training, and bringing the joy of historical martial arts into our modern lives. I hope you enjoy this greatest hit episode of the show. You can find all the episodes at swordschool.com/podcast, and there's a direct link in the description to this episode's show notes. On with the show.
I'm here today with Jo York, who is a provost of the Hotspur School of Defence and an entrepreneur in her work life, as well as, she says, an avid listener of the show. So, without further ado, Jo, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Guy. Great to be here.
It's nice to meet you. Your name is familiar to me because you have bought a lot of my stuff.
I buy everything. In fact, I'm sometimes the first person to buy some of your stuff.
Which is why I know it's like, oh, I've made a sale. Hooray. Oh, and it's Jo again. Fantastic. Okay, so just to orient everybody, whereabouts in the world are you?
I am in lovely, sunny today, Whitley Bay, which is in the northeast of England, near Newcastle.
Okay, is that where you're from?
No, originally from Yorkshire, near York. Enough for it to be really confusing when trying to pre-order things in shops when you leave your surname. That's how close to York.
Okay.
Knaresborough is where I'm actually from, which is if you want to know what medieval England theme park would look like, Knaresborough is pretty much it, I guess.
Okay, and York is a close second. I mean, it's...
Yeah, definitely, yeah. But it doesn't have a witch, you see. Doesn't have a witch.
Doesn't have a what?
A witch. So,
a witch?
Yeah, so Knaresborough, like, weird fact. Knaresborough, it was the first official tourist attraction, I think, in the entire country. Wow. And it has a place called Mother Shipton's Cave.
Oh, I've heard of that.
It was based on the woman herself said some things that she probably shouldn't have, but the Victorians took it and ran with it and made poems about how she predicted lots of suspiciously very Victorian inventions. That, we've just found this thing. She talked about like metal ships and machines and things like that. Anyway, so yeah, it's I was destined to love history, I think, growing up in Knaresborough.
Well, I spent last weekend in Bath, which is like a time capsule for the late 1700s. It was just, it's very pretty. But I think there's I don't know, up further north, it's more like, it's less preserved to be preserved. It's more preserved just because that's how everybody likes to do things. Yeah, you get a feeling that Bath has been artificially preserved by rich people deciding they don't want it to change. Whereas I think maybe York, that's where it's more like there's just no reason to change it.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes there are reasons to change York. Like trying to drive around it, like that's a terrible idea. But yeah, no, it's good. And Knaresborough's done a really good job of keeping a lot of its charm. I was back there last weekend actually, because we have a thing called bed race, which is imagine. Yeah, so Knaresborough is on a crag and it overlooks the River Nid, and there's a very famous view of like the viaduct with a bridge. What we do is we get like, imagine a hospital bed with slightly bigger wheels. Okay. And we race them. I say we, I've never done this, although I have sort of committed to it now. We race them along waterside, up the crag, and it's a really steep hill.
Hang on. So, okay. Is somebody in the bed?
Yeah. So you have somebody sat on the bed, and I think there's about 8 people. This might not be right, but there's 8 people that are allowed to push it, and it's a time trial. And they go all the way up there, all along Waterside, all the way up this crag, round the marketplace, down the high street, round the corner, and then if it's really good weather, through the river at the bottom. Okay. And it's a time trial, and there's a fancy dress element to it as well.
That does sound like a lot of fun. I think I would be best placed on the bed. I don't see myself as running up and down hills pushing beds myself.
Yeah, no, it's incredibly, incredibly difficult. But yeah, so I was back there last weekend actually, which is probably why like it's very much at the forefront of my memory on history and stuff. But like I would definitely recommend people go. It's a really good day trip. There's even like a talking raven. So, what else do you need in the castle courtyard? It's very Yorkshire. It's hilarious.
So there's a talking raven in the castle.
Yeah.
And it's just, and we're talking about a genuine raven, like not a mechanical thing.
No, it's a real bird. I think one of them actually might be a South African crow or something. But it's hilarious. You can honestly look this up on YouTube, and it does swear at people, but it's famous for saying "You're out, love. You're out, love. You're out, love."
You don't actually work for the Yorkshire Tourist Board, do you?
No, but I could. I mean, it has my name in it,
could.
so
Well, there we go. Excellent. So, how did you stumble upon my old friend Bob Brooks and the Hotspur School? How did that happen?
So, I'd been thinking about doing something like this for a couple of years. I've done loads of martial arts in the past. But I did judo as a kid. Everybody does that, so it probably doesn't actually count. Capoeira for a bit.
Oh,
do you remember that? Do you remember that time in the 90s where you couldn't buy a mobile phone without seeing like capoeira?
Yes.
I was like, I want to do that. That looks cool.
Yes. Fighting while upside down.
I know, right? Wearing massive trousers.
Yeah.
There is a theme in my martial arts of can I wear massive trousers in this, to be fair.
And if you can't, why would you do it?
I know, right? So, so my gateway into big trousers started with capoeira. And then I did Aikido for about 10 years. And I got to first dan. I actually did my first dan twice. Okay. And again, so when you get to your black belt, which is your first dan in Aikido, you basically earn your trousers. You earn like...
Yeah. The hakama, the great big black swooshy things. Yeah.
Yeah. So presumably up to that point, you've just been training in your pajamas for that whole time. And now you're allowed to get fully dressed.
Yes.
And I'll be honest.
Seems to be the way it is.
Yeah, and I stayed and I got involved because I was like, I want a pair of those. That's great. But yeah, so obviously a lot of it is like open hand, unweaponed. Yeah. That's a phrase. Open hand fighting. So that's good. But my favourite bits are always when we brought out the daggers or the staff, which is called a jo. So obviously there's an affinity there. Yeah. Or like the bokkens. And I was always wanting to do more of that, and I would turn around and go, this is great, and everyone would be like, can we just go back to the normal stuff? And right, fine. So then it got a bit political. A martial art getting political, surely not.
Really? I've never heard of that before. In what way political? So my main instructor is one of my best friends in the world, actually, and he's been my business partner for years. And when he needed Aikido most, I'm not sure if this was engineered this way, but it seemed like the head of the organization basically took it away from him. But because I was running the business at the time, I didn't realize actually how much friction there was into this still being a thing for him that he needed in a very, very difficult time. And I only found out about it over like subsequent years, and it just got harder and harder to turn. I mean, I went to training because I saw my friends there, but it just got harder and harder to want to progress in that environment. Right. He's quite a. This will probably be cut out, but he's quite a Marmite character, that particular guy. And other Aikido schools are available. Yeah, for the Americans who don't know Marmite is something you either absolutely love it or you can't stand it. Hence Marmite character, yeah. Yeah,
actually, no, that might not be true. I think he rubs people up the wrong way. I think that's probably not even Marmite. I think you like him for a while. Anyway, other Aikido schools are available. But so I learned an awful lot about body mechanics, which I think has given me a really good head start in the world of HEMA. But I was looking for something else that was a teacher that I could really like not believe in. That sounds weird, but like a teacher that like I liked, that I trusted, that I knew that was good. And I walked in and I met Bob, and I'm like, he is the opposite of that guy. This is somebody that I really like, that I trust, and just the way that he did. This first time I saw him cut like a straightforward Oberhau with a long sword, I was like, he knows what he's doing. This is different. I'm going to learn so much here. And then they let me pick up a sword, and I'm like, I'm staying, take my money.
Yeah. I mean, I've known Bob for more than half my life. And yeah, he's a thoroughly good bloke.
Yeah, he is.
I say I would trust him completely. I mean, we don't always agree on absolutely every detail of how swords should be used. I mean, he keeps banging on about this German shit instead of coming to the true Italian religion. I didn't say that. But yeah,
I know that you disagree on the Italian stuff as well, guys, so that's fine.
Yeah. But no, he's an absolutely solid bloke for sure.
Yeah. And I think when you meet somebody that really knows the subject, that you like, this person has forgotten more than I will probably ever know about this subject. And I can learn so much from this person. And he will tell you, I mean, you know, Bob, he is a talker. It's the asking him to stop telling you about the thing he wants you to know that's the issue, not the actual thing. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I've learned an incredible amount. From him. So so the reason that I wasn't sure about whether I wanted to do HEMA or not is because there was a couple of other things. So there was another sword group in the centre of Newcastle who was more of like a performance thing. Mm-hmm. And then, you know, I knew that there was this like historically accurate. Everyone's gonna neckbeard if I say it's historically accurate, historically based, like historically as much as we can.
Should we say working towards historical accuracy?
Yes, exactly. This other thing, and then I found out we could do sparring with it, and none of my martial arts have ever been stress tested. You know, Aikido is very much, I will stab you now.
Yes.
Whereas, and then and because you have to commit to it.
Yeah, I have a friend of mine who's a very, very good Aikido person. He's like, I think he's like 5th or 6th dan now. But anyway, many moons ago, when he was younger and, shall we say, more foolish, he would go down to the dodgier bits of Helsinki on a Saturday night and not pick fights with drunks, but let drunks pick fights with him, and then very carefully, gently lower them to the ground in such a way that they weren't injured, but he actually got to practice doing his thing against someone who wasn't cooperating.
Yeah,
right.
I mean, amazing.
But he had to go to the dodgier bits of Helsinki on a Saturday night to find that. It wasn't available within the mainstream training of the art. And I think that can be a problem for some people. Yeah,
it is. I mean, so when people are being more generous about Aikido, I mean, obviously there's good Aikido, there's bad Aikido. And the problem with Aikido is there's so many different styles. So there's the very soft style that's very much more like interpretive dance, and it's a bit more like Tai Chi. And it is all about that body mechanics and that sort of control over your body and like moving with purpose, all the way up to very direct techniques.
Okay, and let's say my top best unarmed sparring I have ever done, right, was with an Aikido guy we met in Dallas. I don't think it was the first time we met, but it was the first time we played together. It was a guy called Joe Alvarez. And this is in 2006. It's still like 16 years ago, and it's still like in my head as this amazing moment. And we found this kind of padded squash courty area, and we just went for it, right? And I was, doing like kung fu-y stuff and boxing-y kind of stuff and kicks and whatnot. And I mean, he's the only Aikido person I've met, other than my Helsinki friend. He's the only Aikido person I've met who can actually handle multiple jabs to the face, no problem. Right? Because they don't normally train it. But anyway, there was this glorious moment where I had come in for something and he'd ended up doing a sacrifice throw. And as his shin came up towards my groin, as he was throwing me over his head as he fell backwards, I caught his shin between my own shins, which propelled me further away, and I rolled, turned, and we got straight back into it. It was bliss.
Brilliant. I love it.
Yeah.
But that's the thing, isn't it? The criticisms about Aikido is, yes, you have to learn how to receive the technique.
Sure.
But part of that is so that the other person can commit to doing that technique.
Exactly.
And the trust that you have to have between, like, you know, the person doing the technique and the person receiving is huge. If I'm attacking somebody, that I have to trust them not to kill me, and they have to trust me to do the exact breakfall or whatever that they need me to not die or lose something important, like the functioning use of a hand or something like that.
Yeah.
And it's beautiful. It is beautiful. But I think a lot of that gets lost in, you know, like, can you use it on the streets?
What streets do you live on? I mean, really. Yeah. Like, my top tip for street defense is live on a nice street.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
Like,
yeah.
Don't go to the nasty ones.
Yeah. And what Aikido's been very good at teaching me is don't be where the attack is. If that's a couple of inches out the way, great. If that's, in a completely different room, better. If that's by some lifestyle choices that you have the privilege to make, even better.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, yes, Aikido. I can't remember how we got there. Why did we get back to Aikido?
Well, because we were talking about not being able to spar.
That was, not being able to spar. That's right. So I was looking for something where I could stress test, because I've never had that before. And so I was looking around, and when I realised that we could do sparring, you know, varying different degrees, there were competitions for this. I thought that was interesting. I hadn't done that before. And so the sheer span of what is available to you in HEMA, not even only like weapons, historical periods. If you just love looking through historical text, that you can look at the pictures, that's great. If you really just like stress testing at speed, and you don't care about technique, there are tournaments for you. There is the whole thing. And I just thought that was absolutely fascinating. And then I think it took me, like all these things, it takes like a couple of, you know, I'm now going to put my work hat on now and say, you talk about in marketing, like touch points, right? So I think I had a friend that went and trained with Bob years ago and said, oh, you like swords and medieval stuff. You should go and train there. And I was like, yeah, that does sound quite interesting. And then there was a couple of other people that had talked about it. And then I saw the BBC documentary that Bob was talking about, the project that he'd done with the University of Newcastle with the Bronze Age stuff.
Oh, yeah, the damage to the edges on Bronze Age stuff. Yeah.
I think the documentary was called Britain's Pompeii.
Something like that.
And I was listening, and I was watching it, and I was like, oh, that's that guy from Newcastle. So I immediately emailed him.
Oh, okay.
And said, you know, can I come along and train? So it did take a little while. And then of course when I walked in, I was like, why didn't I do this 10 years ago?
To be fair, I would say of all the martial arts, historical martial arts generally are improving and developing faster than any other martial art I've come across, because we're not constrained by what the masters did, in a sense. You know, my teacher does this, my teacher does that, well, so what? Our teachers have been dead for centuries, and so we have, you know, as if you think of like martial arts generally, you know, maybe you've got Tai Chi over here, where the way a lot of people do Tai Chi, there's no even real contact. Then you've got maybe Aikido, and then you've got some of the Kung Fu stuff, and then you've got some Japanese stuff, and there's tournament karate, and there's like demonstration karate, where they basically judge you on how well you do your forms. And there's sort of, if you like, Okinawan against samurai street combat karate, which is like the traditional thing. So you have all of these varieties of different martial arts, with tournament ones and internal ones, and ones with no sparring, and ones which are all sparring, and all that breadth. We have all of that breadth within historical martial arts. Some clubs just care about tournaments and they train for tournaments. Other clubs just care about getting the historical stuff right, and that's what they do. Most clubs have some kind of blend of these things, but we're not constrained by our teachers in the same way that modern traditions often are. So you don't have that, well, in our style, we don't do this, right? I might say, well, in my club, we tend not to emphasize tournament stuff. We can do, so you want to go to a tournament? That's great. Fine. We suggest maybe go and train with these guys for a few weeks before you go to the tournament, because they're really into the tournaments, and it's still all historical martial arts. It's all under that umbrella.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
yeah, I think, again, thinking about my time at Aikido, even in our, in my main class where maybe there was about 20 people, and the depth of skill there was exceptional. I was very, very, very lucky to train with those people. But the way, so if we take one specific technique, there would be 3 or 4 different ways of doing it. Like, so this is, we'd say this was like first pin or whatever. So in Aikido language, you've got Ikkyo, Nikkyo, first pin, second pin, whatever.
Yeah.
But like there's one of them, a particular joint lock, which I won't go into now, but there are lots of different ways to do it, lots of different ways to emphasize different parts of the underlying principles. And so I would often talking about, well, this is how this person does this technique because they're taller, or their limbs are taller, or their hands are like this. This person does it somewhere like slightly differently because they're working in a different body with different preferences, and being able to pick apart, this is the same underlying principle with a similar name, but it's all the same thing. Just it strips off all of that like needs to go. I think actually you'll find you move your finger here. This is the actual technique. Like it's an underlying principle with like tactics on top. And I think that often gets missed in martial arts. And you're right. It's like, no, this is my style. And actually it's your own personal style, right? You have individual parameters of how your body works, what your preferences are, what solutions you'll find in that particular second, and there's tweaks that you can try, and some will work for you and some won't, and that's applicable to every single martial art.
Yeah, and if you look at, for example, Fiore, medieval Italian stuff, the techniques so-called are called plays, right? And it's not because it's like, no consequences playing around. It's because there is play within, like, if you're doing this action, if you do it exactly the same way every time against every opponent, it's going to fail sometimes because you have to adapt it for different opponents, right? Or different specific contexts. But the idea is, this is the idea, this is the technique, this is the principle. In this particular context, it looks just like this. And so we have the canonical form of the play, which is exactly like the book with exactly the same setup, exactly this, and it's all specified, right? But then once you've got it in that context, you're supposed to play with it and figure out how you would make that idea work in different contexts. And in some contexts, it won't work at all. In other contexts, it will work even better than it does in the canonical play, right? But you're supposed to play with it. Yeah.
And I think a lot of people lose that. They look at the pictures and go, no, my foot needs to be exactly here.
Which when you're doing the canonical play is true. You have to know the canonical play so that you have an example, in a physical example of the principle in practice, right? So and you know that, okay, this is supposed to work in exactly the situation, and you've got to get it to work in that situation, and you've got to get it reasonably right so that you can actually see it. So you can see the principle, right?
Yeah.
So
100%.
but then if you're, if you happen to have the wrong leg forward, but your opponent's sword is under your control and your sword is in their face, that was definitely correct.
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Totally agree. I mean, whilst we're talking about Fiore, I mean, I think one of the things that I think is interesting about Hotspur and the way that Bob sort of like put the structure around it is that we do like almost like 100-year period. So we do lots of different weapons, but we do lots of different sources as well.
Okay.
And I really enjoy looking and comparing the sources. It's like, why does Vardy say this is important, and under what context? Why is he emphasizing these bits and Fiore does it this way? And it's not just yes, there's a time period and there's like maybe a different style of fencing. So, with Faulkner or whatever, it's more of like a tournament fencing. It's more like a factual environment, whereas like Talhofer definitely wants to kill you. But like, it's that they all have underlying principles. They're all talking about the same things, but they're describing them in different ways. And I think once you can piece them together like that, you're like, this is that thing that I need to, what am I doing? I'm opening my hips. And for instance, Fiore might do it by doing a step across to open up the hips and then turn. Talhofer might do it by like moving the back foot in a wind, but it's the same principle of like, what are your hips doing? What is your body doing? What are these? How can I influence what's happening in a bind by moving the like other bits of my body around it? So Vardy will talk about the knees being keys, right? So that is exactly the same as same principle as like manipulating your body, and how you describe that. People would do it differently, but it just opens up this whole world of like tinkering with individual bits of technique and then working that whole body together. I just find it absolutely fascinating.
Yeah. So what period does Bob cover?
Mostly 15th century. So we go
Okay.
Fiore up to Faulkner recently has been like the sort of latest one that we've been doing. I do other things.
Okay, when was Faulkner? I'm not familiar.
Oh, that is a good question.
It's been a very long time since I've heard it. I should just point out that Joe just took down Captain of the Guild, which I think is that's Christian Tobler's. Is that right?
It is.
Yeah.
Yes, it is. I don't know. Christian will probably be able to tell us if that's. I think it's very early 1600s.
Well, I was going to say because you were saying like 1400. Like Faulkner.
Sorry,
by my recollection, was late 16th century, but so I don't know.
Anyway, we do that.
Cool.
It's not early enough for poofy pants, so it's definitely not 16th century. Yeah. So, I really enjoy that, looking at a complete system and then working out what does it have in common? Why is it different? What are the different tactics to solve similar problems? I find that absolutely fascinating, rather than just concentrating on one master's work. Which I know has you can spend a lifetime doing that. Yeah,
I mean, I take an even sort of broader historical view, right? I do Fiore, which is like the early 15th century stuff, and Vardy because it's sort of connected, and I just like Vardy. And then Rapier, Capoferro, and whatnot. I kind of skipped the 16th century for reasons we don't need to go into. But so I've got like rapier and dagger, that sort of thing. And then 18th century stuff, small sword and sabre.
Yeah.
Right? So if you think about it, I've got like long sword, big cutty weapon.
Yeah.
Sabre, shorter cutty weapon. I also do a bit of messer and falchion and whatnot, because why not? Because they're lovely. Yeah. And then rapier, long thrusty weapon. Small sword, shorter thrusty weapon. And of course daggers, very short thrusty weapon. Right? And all the kind of accompaniment. So weapons in two hands, weapons, so sword and buckler, because I do medieval sword and buckler as well, so from 133, which is like my earliest thing. Yeah. So sword and buckler, sword and dagger, sword and cape, all that sort of stuff. So I don't even really think of it in these terms, but when I look back at it, it's like sidearms from 500 years, right? And what I'm really interested in is how do these different weapon types behave differently, right? And what context was this weapon developed for? I mean, very obviously the rapier was developed for a different use than the knightly longsword.
Yes.
Right? Yes. They're similar in many ways, but the use case is different, and so the weapon is different. And how much is the change in the weapon changing how it's used, or the change in the intended use changing the design of the weapon, and how much of it is simply just fashion, right?
Yes.
I mean, a lot of it is just fashion.
Yeah.
Some bellwether person like, I don't know, King of France or whatever, decided that he wanted a sword like this, started wearing one. Now everybody wants one.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I'm not a fan of being restricted to one system. And even if you are, let's say I was just doing Capoferro, right? If that was my only thing I was interested in doing. To understand Capoferro properly, I would still have to study what came before, what came after, and what was being done at the same time that was different.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think of it as like a cross. You put your target system in the middle, and there's what came before, what came after, and what was happening at the same time. So on either side. Yes. And that, because one book cannot possibly contain all of it.
Yeah. Yeah, of course. And then there's the fact that the actual author themselves, you might just resonate with the way that somebody writes or describes something better, which is why I buy everything. Like I buy all your books, all everyone else's books. If anybody wants me to read their books early.
No, Joe. I'm very happy for you to be reading my books and buying my books, but I don't want you buying anybody else's, okay? Because they might disagree with me, and then you might think I was wrong, and that would be, no. Sorry, no.
But to be fair, you've got me to buy other people's books as well. So yes, you mentioned the 133 course. Of course, I have that too. So the Paul Wagner Stephen Hand book, which I affectionately called Wagner Hand, I found that book, which is very difficult to get, by the way, now. Because you recommend. So it's like, what do I not know? And it's this quest constantly of like, I need to learn.
And that book, it came out 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And at that time, and both Stephen and Paul are friends, and I'm not speaking out of turn. Yeah, he's a lovely guy. Yeah. Steve's a good chap too. But that book is really interesting to see what was the state of the art in sword and buckler research 20 years ago, and then compare it to what's being done now. And it's like my Swordsman's Companion book, which came out a couple of years later. Right? Technically, it's entirely obsolete, but it's still an interesting window into how people were approaching this stuff decades ago. Yeah.
And I think one of the things that a recurring theme in all of this is, someone will write an article about something and go, I've just worked something out. And loads of people like yourself that have been doing this for a very long time will say, oh yeah, we went through that process and we got to a similar place. But the problem is there's been 20 years of conversation, we can't get back to that point to hear it. So it's looking at why was it like that? Yeah. Well,
okay. My issue is with that sort of thing is when people come up with their fantastic new theory and blah, blah, blah. These days, there's a kind of due diligence process that people ought to be doing before they start spouting their opinions on things. They should check what has been done before, because it's actually really annoying when somebody, you publish something and then 10 years go by and people are not doing what's called a literature, in academia we call it a literature review. They're not doing before they start spouting their opinions, they're not doing a literature review and figuring out and seeing what's already been done and doesn't need to be repeated, what's already been done but they might disagree with, and they're not actually interacting with the published work that's gone before. I mean, fair enough, if it's just somebody posted it on Sword Forum 20 years ago, it's not reasonable to trawl through Sword Forum to find stuff. But if it's been out in a book or an article or something like that, I think there's a reasonable expectation of due diligence being done.
But the advantage, I totally understand where you're coming from. I think Bob has the same attitude. But when I come in and I'm like, I've seen this, that's different to why do we do it that way? And why was it done that way? So I get to hear that full, that full conversation of what happened. What was it that made you, why is that not the right, why is that not your current interpretation of this?
Yeah.
Like, what did you learn? So I get to relive all of those conversations. So whilst I appreciate that's probably really frustrating for you, it's super useful for me in my learning.
Well, fine. In which case, I shall be less of a grumpy old man.
No, but please rant more publicly. I like that because I learn.
Okay, so I described you in the intro as a provost of the Hotspur School of Defence. Now, I'm familiar with the term, obviously, but I'm guessing that quite a lot of my listeners will not be. What does it mean generally, and what does it mean specifically in the context of the Hotspur School?
Yeah, I think it's a very traditional term, which still gets used in some universities. But I think that comes with some admin sort of jobs. In ours, it's all of the grades, if you like, in our school is based on, I think it was the fight schools that were around in under Henry VIII's reign, and therefore we use that as a sign to show progress.
The Guild of the Meisters of Defence, you mean?
That's the one, yes.
Yeah.
So we have exactly the same ranks. So, you start off as a fellow.
Yeah.
Rightly or wrongly, as gendered as that language might be. That's the traditional term. A fellow, and then scholar, and then free scholar, and then provost. And it's basically your progression of your understanding of what we're learning, application in whatever way, whether that's academic or whether that's, in some sort of sparring situation. And for some weapons, that's easier than others. And so our first grade is scholar, which is the rest of the school fence the people taking the grading, essentially, I guess, with longsword and messer that are our prime weapons. And it's sort of friendly sparring, but the idea is like, are they a danger to either themselves or others? Can they actually at least protect themselves? Can they show control under something that's like getting closer to a more stressful situation? Are they able to start to pick techniques and responses under duress? And so we do 40 passes, which is basically until someone, says, "Oh, I've been hit," or something like that. With each weapon, but quite often, because it's an entire afternoon.
That's quite a lot.
It is, and quite often it goes on quite a lot longer than that, to maybe like 120 passes. I think we've had 180. Someone was very, very keen.
Okay.
But it's basically a friendly sparring day. No one has to win. Nobody scores. No one has to win. It's not about winning and losing. It's about celebrating what you've learned, I guess. That's the sort of thing. And very, very few people fail. We've had a couple of advisories, and it's mostly under things like thrusts that are not quite controlled to our liking to the face. Okay. Yes, we have that. And then you're able to pick up and study the other weapons. So we have four other things that you can learn. Sword and buckler, poleaxe, dagger, and wrestling. Okay. So you pick up 2 of your electives, and then when you've passed some sort of assessment with the next 2, then you become a free scholar. And then when you sort of know all of them, and everything has to improve every stage. So your longsword and messer also has to have improved for you to get to that free scholar place. And then when we've run out of weapons that Bob and the senior students feel like everybody's well versed with, knows enough sources, then you are awarded provost. But I think over the last 19 years... Sorry.
Was there a test for it?
No.
Interesting. Okay, because George Silver has lists these various tests and things, and your first one for scholar feels a lot like the sort of testing that George Silver was talking about. And what's happening after that seems to be more kind of academic and internal. Is that fair?
Sort of. Yes. I suppose I sort of found out about the fact that I was being awarded this after a class on a Monday, and then it went public. And that's why I haven't really responded yet, because I still don't know what to do with it. I'm like, this was going to be the next 4 years of my life. What am I supposed to study? So I need to think of what am I going to do? So yeah, I mean, you're never done with this, but I liked that as a framework. So I picked, as my electives, I actually picked sword and buckler, which is one of the reasons that I signed up for your class. So and I'm just absorbing as much of that, basically. And poleaxe, because poleaxe is beautiful. I love it so much. Oh,
yeah. For the listeners who can't see it, I just grabbed my poleaxe off the wall and I'm waving it at Jo to make her feel at home.
Yeah, love it. It's just the Swiss Army knife. It's all of them. It's all of the weapons, right? So there's a dagger in there. There's an axe. There's 2 long swords attached together at the pommel.
and a spear.
And a spear, right?
Yeah.
So, I think it's... but, yes, so I chose those 2. And then I didn't do dagger because obviously I did lots of dagger at Aikido. And although the Tanto is a lot shorter... the techniques are very, very, very similar. Yeah. And one of the things that really struck me about Fiore's dagger work, particularly, well, all of it, but I think Fiore was the one that I was introduced to first. It was like, this is Aikido, but I've just swapped my hands over. And it's like, oh yes, because humans have the same pivot points as they've always had. Okay, this makes a lot of sense. So I didn't pick that up as an elective, because it felt like cheating. Okay. But then we went to Dijon and there was a class, it was a dagger class, and it was sort of a little bit of, like sort of sparring. So they had to give you attacks and, there had to be a little bit sort of like resisting. And I just really enjoyed myself. It was so much fun. And all of those Aikido instincts. I mean, I have done things like that. And we were on mats. I haven't trained on mats like that for ages. And I had lots of lovely, lovely training partners. And at one point, I think I had somebody in a headlock. So I didn't have the dagger on me. I had this guy and he had a dagger. I'd got behind him and I was choking him out whilst I got mine and stabbing him. And at another point, some other instinct came in. Somebody had got me, sort of bent over. So I did a forward roll. I don't know what happened, but by the time we'd come up on the other side, I had his dagger. So I was just sort of like jokingly said, can we consider that my prize play? And the people that were from the school that were there, like, I would back you for that. And then they had a conversation, and Bob decided actually, rather than just doing that, he just wanted to award me the provost. So it came from a cheeky ask to escalating way more. Yeah. All right. So yes, I don't really know what to do with it yet, and it feels like a bit of an honour that I think will take a while to sink in.
Yeah, and does it convey? I mean, does it involve any like teaching responsibilities or anything like that?
Well, I've been helping teach for ages, to be honest.
No, it's not specific to the role. Like I have provosts in my school in Helsinki, and any branch has a provost, and the provost is the person who's responsible for running the branch under my sort of direction, as it were. So when I'm not there, they're in charge. And there's an assumption that they've been training for a while or whatever, but fundamentally in my school it's an administrative rank. Right?
Yeah. Yes, it is. But before this, Bob gave me the title of captain, which was, again...
Bob obviously likes you very much.
I'm very, very enthusiastic.
Captain Joe York, provost.
Yeah, so... and it was just because... So in my day job, I do a lot of like coaching and things like that, obviously. So I work in startup world where I've had my own startups, and then now I coach other startups, and I run a program that finishes today, actually, where I've been working with 15 founders that had very interesting techie ideas. And I've helped them over the last 5 months, like stress test that and sort of, hopefully give them all of the foundations for those to be like very good scalable businesses. So because I've worked in startups, it means I've worn lots and lots of different hats. I can code. I was a graphic designer before anything else. So obviously I got into interface design in like the late 90s. And so I've done sales, marketing, business coaching. I'm used to sort of like building a brand and things like that. So as soon as Bob found out these were skills that I had, he started asking for advice, and it sort of escalated.
You do know that I will be asking you to have a look at what I'm doing and tell me how it could be improved or streamlined.
Please do. I would love that. I would, yeah, absolutely. I would love that. Yeah, so I've sort of been doing those admin roles a bit. The website is still terrible because I haven't had time, but it's much better than it used to be. But we've done things like a beginner's course, which has been really, really successful, sold out pretty much for the last 2 years. Since we could in lockdown, they've been absolutely sold out every single time. And it's mean that we've probably doubled the size of the school over the last couple of years. All of that is like streamlined now. So I have been doing those, and so I do things like buy the t-shirts, design the t-shirts, buy the t-shirts. So people have been coming to me for those roles, and then of course if Bob isn't there, then there's sort of a hierarchy of students that would teach the class. So Andy, who's been provost for a couple of years, would do that, and then maybe Ian or myself would come in and teach something. But we've all helped write bits of the beginner's course and things like that. So I've been doing that for a while. So I guess it's also an acknowledgement of that as well. But and I just love swords and teaching people about swords and finding new people and telling them about swords.
Yeah, there's a little bit of the evangelist in us, I think.
Yeah, because there's still part of me that can't believe this is a thing that I'm allowed to do. And
right.
if 7-year-old me knew that adult me found out about this and wasn't throwing everything into this, I'd never have forgiven myself. Like, you know, it's like when you look at the child in you, and quite often if I haven't, so the first event that I went to back after lockdown, I was just so happy to be surrounded by sword people, like learning, just, you know, it's just, I love it. Absolutely love it. I can't get enough of it.
Yeah, it is nice to be with your tribe, isn't it?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Now, you mentioned some of your entrepreneurial stuff, and obviously I research my guests before interviewing them because it's the polite thing to do and it makes for a better interview. And there's a bunch of stuff on your LinkedIn bio that I don't understand. So I'm going to ask you some questions about that, which feel free to relate it to swords if you like, but you can just
I'll find a way.
Because it's all swords, really, right?
It is.
Okay. All right. So, ignite accelerator.
Yes.
So what you do is you take some lighter fluid, you put it on the accelerator pedal, and you light it. Ignite accelerator. What is an accelerator exactly?
So think of it as a personal development program, but with a very keen business focus. And so we have 2 programs that we run every year. One of them is a pre-accelerator. So that's very, very early stage businesses, usually tech, with high scaling potential. And it could be someone that has an idea, or they might have built something, but they just need a bit of help turning it into an actual business. And so that's the first one that we do is a pre-accelerator. And then later on in the year, we do like an accelerator, which is more of a focus on raising investment. Some of our pre-accelerator teams raise investment from investors, but the accelerator is more focused on that and raising larger amounts of money. So
if I have a tech idea, you're the person I should talk to.
Yes, I'll probably tell you it's rubbish, but
okay. Well, I tell you, why don't I just float a problem?
Brilliant. You've already started well, Guy.
Okay. If I float a problem at you, you tell me whether this has potential or not. Okay. One of the biggest issues that people have with creating any kind of IP is handling the money afterwards. Because let's say you and I cooperated on writing a book or producing an online course or something, then for 70 years after our deaths, we still have to split that money, right? Yeah. That's hard. Okay. So there are some, in the book world, there are, for ebooks, there is Drafted Digital, for example, will allow multiple authors and they will split the money for you, right? So you put in how much issue is entitled to and they will split the royalties for you, right? Which makes life easier. But that's just ebooks, so no print, and that's just books, so not online courses, there's a million different kinds of IP you could be producing, pictures and whatnot. Okay. So my idea is for a platform where you can collaborate with people and register your IP or your ownership of this IP through this platform, and it will act as all the money goes into the platform, which is then split up amongst the collaborators. And the other thing this allows you to do is, let's say I've written the next Harry Potter or something even better, right? But because I'm an impoverished author, I can't afford to pay an editor properly or a cover designer properly, right? So what I could do is I could say, look, I will pay you this much up front and this percentage of the royalties from this thing in perpetuity. And so people like, I don't know, I'm thinking in terms of books, but obviously it's wider. People like graphic designers, layout designers, editors, all these creative people who are involved, who are usually only paid upfront a fixed fee, and that's that, actually get a piece of the action long term. So if the book does do a Harry Potter, they go rich. Imagine how pissed off you'd be to know you got paid maybe $1.5 grand, $2,000 to do the first Harry Potter book, and that's it, right?
Yeah.
And you get none of the action afterwards, right?
Yeah.
So what this platform would do would be allow creatives to plausibly offer a piece of the action to people who are normally involved in the process but only get an upfront fee normally, like a session fee for a musician, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And of course, the money's in the long tail, right?
Yeah.
And it persists 70 years after the death of the copyright owners.
Yeah.
Right.
Of course.
So this platform, it would have to have the ability to handle the money, the ability to split the money for a specific project amongst people who have a certain stake in it. So let's say for our project, I own 30%, you own 30%, and the other 40% is split between, say, 5 other people who were involved, maybe a graphic designer, maybe an editor, maybe a photographer, maybe whoever, right? And the money will get put into their accounts on that platform automatically when, for instance, we make a sale on Teachable, we make a sale on whatever platform we're selling on.
Yeah. Fantastic idea.
Isn't it?
really like
You see, I had this idea 5 years ago, but the problem is I'm not a tech startup person. I'm not a...
Let's build it. Let's go.
We could build it.
We could. So most very early stage tech is all about, it's usually about founder problem fit, right? Yeah. And the reason for that is you need to be really passionate about what you're building and really care about it. And the more inside knowledge you have, if there's any secret sauce to any of this, it's know more about your customers than anybody else.
Right.
And that's the same for you when you're writing books and content. It's the same thing, right? It's exactly the same thing. And what traditionally happens is people get so in love with their own ideas that they miss all of the feedback of people going, that's not quite what I write. So they build it and then they go, how many do you want? And everyone goes, no. So and it's applying the scientific method to business. And just tech startups have got really good at it because it's there's so many more unknowns. So the analogy that I always give is like hairdressers. Big fan of hairdressers. My mum's a hairdresser, so I feel like I understand it as like a business. But there's certain things we don't need to prove. We know a lot of people have hair. They want it cut, usually with scissors. They want it sort of nearby, and we understand that there's different costs involved. That's a model that's been proven. With a tech startup, people might have hair, they might want it cut. Do they want it blowtorched off? Do they, like, can I hit it with an axe? Like, and so the only question there with the hairdressers is, do you want me to cut your hair? And I can tell you from lockdown, the answer is no, you do not. Nobody wants that.
Oh, can I just say, right, I have 2 teenage daughters. Both of them get me to cut their hair.
Nice.
Yes.
Skills. Yeah.
Well, honestly,
what style is it?
They have long straight hair, and every now and then they want it trimmed off straight at the back. That's it. So it's
that
honestly
is a
not...
skill. That is a skill. I'm terrible at it. My mum would be very embarrassed. In fact, she has been. She's seen my partner's hair when I had to cut it over lockdown, and she's like, "What have you done?" Yeah. So so there's a lot of unknowns basically. So like by my job really for the pre-accelerator has been, so I've had 15 teams over the last 5 months, and today weirdly is the last day. So we did a big showcase on Wednesday, and they all had to pitch. I had a 3-minute pitch to a live audience. My job is to basically try and give them the foundations to be able to work out whether what they're doing, like, is it the core business idea? Is it speaking to customers? Is it the marketing? What is it? How do they test? How do they do very small tests to test every hypothesis all the way through that business? And I can tell you, it's much easier to do it from the outside looking in than it is from the inside of your own startup. So that's the advantage that I have. And also I've done it 3 times now, so I've made a lot of my own mistakes, and I know the implications of making a decision early on that you might not see where it goes in like year 3 or 4 or whatever.
And the thing is, the founding DNA of a company determines so much about what happens next. Like, I mean, the reason Facebook is a cesspool is because it originally began as a way for dude bros at Harvard to rate the hotness of their female classmates. Yeah. I mean, how is that not going to turn into something shitty? It has to.
Yeah, exactly. Right? Yeah, exactly. So it's certain things over that 5 months. So it could be like workshops, but we also have, other people like me that'll have a weekly meeting with the teams. And we just coach them, like, what problems have you got? What solutions do you need? Who do you need to speak to? Do I know someone I can introduce you to that's done that before that you can speak to? So it's all that kind of support around people doing hard things. And then the reason it's a cohort is because they're all going through it together. So now they've got a peer group of people that understand what it's like to try and do impossible things where normal, sensible people that have safer jobs think they're mad, because we all sort of are, right? Entrepreneurs are all sort of a bit mad.
Yes.
And it becomes so much of your own identity, if you're not careful, that, like, the success or failure of this company, this thing that you're building feels like you. And then most startups will fail because they're incredibly hard. It's really risky. But your second one or third one will probably do much, much better. And so, like, it's about building up the person and then helping them separate their ego from that. And then we have done, like how to they're all great people, but we've also done some, like, how do you hire a diverse workforce? And there's maybe some unconscious, like, bias that you don't know yourself, because you're right, culture is such an early part of the business. And particularly if, let's say, you're 2 co-founders, your first hire, that is a third of the business that is now a different person. Yeah. And so very early on, it can go very wrong very quickly, I think. So so I mean, it's brilliant because I get all sorts of things thrown at me from. So just those 15 teams that I've been working with, we've got some metaverse NFT nonsense, and they know that I call it nonsense. It's brilliant nonsense, but to health tech, to some marketing tech in there. We've got some physical products. There's a insole that goes into shoes that will help people detect whether or not people with diabetes are more prone to ulcers. If they get ulcers,
yes, they end up with amputations.
Yeah, and amputations often lead to death.
Yeah, well, they're not happy.
No,
so
but
it's
like,
an insole for diabetics to early detect when their circulation is bad so they can get it before they have to have that. Oh, that is genius.
It's great, isn't it? It's really good.
That is genius.
And then
if it works.
Yes, exactly. So as you can, I'm sure you can all
But the
imagine.
the use case is really straightforward, and finding the people who need it is a very clearly defined segment of the human population. If you don't have diabetes, this is not useful to you. If you have certain kinds of diabetes, it's not useful to you. But if you have the sort of diabetes which puts your feet at risk of being chopped off, this is something that you want, and it's a small expense to stave off a massive downside.
Yeah.
So as a business, it's an obvious slam dunk if it works.
Yeah. Well, if it works, and that's always the thing, right? So it's about finding what's the thing that you want to build. Who cares about that? And do they really care about it? So we talk about this, as you can imagine, there's a whole load of stupid phrases and jargon in startup world. But one of them is it a painkiller or a vitamin? Like, so are you actually solving somebody's pain, or is it just, it's a nice to have thing? Because once you actually, and it's finding that's product market fit in the truest term comes much later. But if you can find a problem that people really want to solve, you can find different solutions for that, and that's a business.
But also, like, one person's painkiller is another person's vitamin. Swords are a great example.
Yes.
The core of the people who, pay my rent, not that I rent anymore, but you get the idea, right? The core of my client base, to talk in business terms, are the people for whom swords are more than a painkiller, and they're more than a vitamin. They are oxygen.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I'm helping them get access to this thing that they actually need.
Yeah.
Right. But for most people in the sword world, right, for some it may be a painkiller, but for most of it it's a vitamin. It's a nice to have, and they're cool and they're fun and whatever, but they come and they go.
Yeah.
But for those people for whom this is the thing.
Yeah.
Those are the only people who I actually feel I have to look after properly.
Perfect. That's exactly the right thing. And that's what I would teach the teams. And there's loads of different models to do that, where you work out who. There's a really good questionnaire that we used at my last company, Ricochet. And it's an excellent question. And it's, how disappointed would you be if this thing that you're paying for would go away?
Right.
And all of the people go, some people are like, meh, okay, I would learn to love again. That's fine. Yes. But the people that are just like, no, this would be really bad, they're the only people you should focus on first.
Right. Yeah. And even focus on long term. Actually, I recently read a book called Don't Trust Your Gut by Seth something or other.
Right.
I'll put a note in the show notes.
Yeah.
And he's a fascinating sort of economist, tech person, data scientist sort of person. His first book was called Everybody Lies, in which he talked about basically the difference, basically using Google searches as a window into people's honest, true desires and interests. Because you don't lie to a search engine, but you do lie to psychologists, and you do lie to questionnaires, and you do lie to make yourself look good in all sorts of other situations. But you don't lie to Google because you're looking for the thing you actually want.
Yeah.
But his second book, Don't Trust Your Gut, has all sorts of what he calls counterintuitive facts. Like, for instance, there's this story that successful tech founders are usually young, like 19, 20, 21, like Bill Gates and Mark Zuckerberg, and they made these billion-dollar companies, and they started when they were children, right? But the average age of the successful tech startup founder is mid-40s.
Yeah.
Right? Which when you think about it, is obviously true.
Yeah.
Right? But actually, there's this story that, no, they have to be young or whatever. And there's also the story of, like, the maverick outsider who doesn't really know the industry, and so they can see it clean, and they come up with this genius thing, and it's, like, amazing. And, every now and then, somebody does that, and it works really well.
Yeah.
But, generally speaking, having, say, 20 years of working in that field makes you much more likely to be a successful founder of a company.
Yeah.
Because you understand the field. Actually, that's an advantage.
Absolutely, yeah.
But it's not a sexy story, though.
It's not, but there's all sorts of myths, isn't there? Like you get this. We're so fixated with this hero's journey of like this one person that goes and does something. Actually, what that one person did was really good at finding other people that were really good at the things that they weren't good at. Right?
Are you familiar? Are you familiar with the literary trope of the heroine's journey?
No.
Okay. Hero's journey is, as you say, and it's all very well documented and blah, blah, blah. Less well understood, less talked about is the heroine's journey. It's got nothing to do with the sex or gender of the main protagonist. It has everything to do with their strategy.
Interesting.
Right? And it is, Harry Potter, for example, heroine's journey, because it's a team of kids who get together and defeat Voldemort. Yes, Harry's like the point man, but he'd be dead without Hermione, dead without Ron. It's a team of the three, plus their other helpers, and they all develop over time, and like the Fellowship of the Ring, right? There's only one ring, and Frodo's carrying it, but it's not a hero's journey; it's a heroine's journey, because he is entirely dependent on his team to get him to where he needs to go. Yeah. And at the end, when he is alone, he fails. And then Gollum comes and bites the ring off, and the world is saved. But he actually, when he's finally on his own doing the heroic thing alone, he fails. Right? So it's actually classic heroine's journey stuff.
I will totally check that out. Yeah.
There's books on it.
Yeah, no, I haven't come across that. I mean, I usually talk about the hero's journey when I'm talking to the teams about storytelling, right? So if you're building a business, you're creating a movement. And so that starts with customers, then it goes into team, and then, investors, and sometimes investors before team. But you know what I mean? Like you have to build a movement. And what people mistake with using the hero's story as a framework is they think they're the hero. They're not the hero. The audience is the hero. Like, you have to take them on that particular journey. It's absolutely fascinating. I mean, whilst we're giving book tips, if anybody has got a startup idea or wants to validate something, there's a really good book called The Mom Test, like MOM. It's American.
Yeah. American for mum. Yeah.
It should be mum or like mam in the Northeast, I guess. But the Mum Test. It's basically how to do user interviews, but like really well. So the premise behind the book is the author, whose name escapes me right now, he had this idea to build an app, and he thought his mum was like a perfect archetypal customer for that. And it was all about recipes, I think. And he went and asked her and said, I'm thinking about building this. What do you think? And she went, oh, that's great. That's lovely. Of course I'd buy that. And then he built it and nobody used it because
your mum will buy whatever you make.
Exactly, right? So how do you ask questions to get to the truth, so that even your mum won't lie to you to make you feel good about yourself? That's the idea. So the Mum Test is really, really good. And it's just a really good way of getting to the truth of what is the real problem here. And the other one is like looking through the framework. It's called Jobs to be Done. And there's loads of books on it. But it's basically, what is the job, the thing that you're doing, like is actually trying to solve? What's the job that people would pay somebody for? So in your case with yours, you would maybe pay a broker for that, right? You'd pay
or
a
an accountant
party.
Or something.
Or an accountant.
Yeah. And somebody has to take the money and hand it out like this.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like looking it through those particular lenses and focusing on the problem, not falling in love with the solution. So the other phrase that I want to use here is like, you're quite often products are solutions looking for problems. And that's, you end up building something that people quite fancy, or like it's not built for anybody. It doesn't solve anybody's problem. It sort of looks at a collection of people's problems, and you really need to focus on that. You can widen your audience every single stage, but so in your case with your books and courses, it's people that actually, and it's somebody that wants to study sword and buckler. So you start there, and then, you widen out the weapons, or you widen out a specific thing. You don't just go, I'm going to teach you HEMA. No, it needs to be specific. You're solving a specific problem. And for a lot of courses, it's a beginner's course because you get them in and then you teach them, then you know what they know, and then you can upsell like this is more advanced.
Yeah.
You don't just go, I'm going to teach any human, any weapon. Like, and that's the problem that people make with stuff like that. They go too wide, too quick. So again, very easy to spot from the outside. Easier to spot from the outside.
Yeah.
Really difficult when you're doing it yourself.
Yeah, and the royalty split thing, it was because I was talking to a friend of mine who's written some books and needs to pay for graphic design and editing and whatnot, and doesn't have the money to pay for it up front.
Yeah.
Right? And you can't reasonably ask an editor who you don't know to edit your book in the hopes of future royalties.
Yeah.
Right? That's just mad. No sensible editor would take that unless they were your mum. Your mum would do that, right?
Unless she's lying to you.
Well, yeah, but having some way to sort of hedge it, so you pay less up front because you're giving like Alec Guinness in Star Wars.
Yeah.
Right, when he was hired for Star Wars, they couldn't afford to pay him his usual rate because they had no money then. It was the first Star Wars, and so he got a piece of the action.
Wow, that was a good deal.
That little piece of the action, if I remember the story right, made him more money than all of his other work put together.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. Yeah, right? I mean, makes sense, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I have a basic principle that I won't do significant amounts of work for any company that I don't own a chunk of. Right? Because why would I?
Yeah.
Right? Because if I'm putting work into something, I want that work to be an investment in future growth rather than just something that's put out into the void.
Yeah, makes total sense. And I think this idea as well about paying it forward. Like, there's plenty of people that have helped me up front on my journey, and it's about, if I can help somebody, that's great. But when you can't help everybody for free. In order for me to be available to help other people, I have to get paid in some way to do that. And when you take a gamble, it's because you believe in someone. I mean, that's exactly why very early stage angel investors, so high net worth individuals investing their own money, why they tend to be the first people in, taking the most risk, but they get a larger percentage of the whole thing because they've taken that risk. It's because they believe in something. It's I really believe in paying it forward. But and doing small tests. So speaking of tests and things like that, one of the things that I did last year was I did a little experiment called, it's a cutting square, Myers square. I made an interactive version of it.
Cool.
And it's up at cuttingsquare.com.
Cuttingsquare.com.
Yeah,
I'll put a link in the show notes.
I'll put it in the chat. And it was just, I was like, I want to build this. I think it'd be interesting for people in the school. I wanted something to get my teeth into. Again, after we sold Ricochet, my last startup, and I thought, well, maybe if people.
Joe, that's brilliant.
Thanks. So there is a way to contact me on that, and then I will at some point when I get some time. I will try and make those improvements. But there's left-handed, right-handed. You can set the tempo. It's not perfect. It's very hacked together as like a minimum viable test, but okay,
if this is your idea of hacking something together, I think I think you'll do all right. Okay, so basically what it's doing is it's colouring one square. I think you're supposed to cut into that square, cut into this square, so whichever square it gives you next, that's where you throw your blow. Yeah.
So I will at some point make it so it can be used offline on a phone, which is the biggest request that I get. But anyway, it's up there. It's up there for people to try. Thank you. I was amazed that it didn't exist already. I was like, why has nobody done this? So, yeah. Anyway, that is, please, everybody enjoy feedback.
Yeah. I will try and remember, I'll make a note to put that into a newsletter as well.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, because the thing is, the solo training thing, it's something of an obsession of mine. I've got my solo training course. My last sort of non-workbooky book was basically the principles of solo training. modestly entitled The Windsor Method, because that's what my friends told me to call it.
Yes.
Right?
It's a great title.
Because if you can't train alone, then you're entirely dependent on finding suitable nutcases to train with, and that's really difficult sometimes.
It's highly inconvenient. Nobody wants to train as much as I do.
Right, and also, like, there's a whole bunch of training that is better done on your own. Right? You can't hit things full force if that other thing is a person.
Yeah.
Right? Certainly not with a sword, anyway.
Yeah. Definitely not with a poleaxe.
No, definitely not. And, do you really need somebody else there when you're doing your strength training and your push-ups and whatnot? I mean, really?
No, it's not really a spectator sport, is it? Oh, I suppose it is CrossFit. But
well, also, although actually, I do have my morning train-alongs, which is not a spectator sport. It's just me doing my training, basically. But really, it's just there so that it's kind of presented as a class, so that students will show up, so that I actually have to show up and do it.
Yeah, totally. Right. Peer pressure works really well. If you can use it for good rather than evil, it's really good.
Yeah, it's not really peer pressure. It's more sort of like
accountability,
professional pride. Professional pride. It's like, I've said I'll run this class at this time in this place. I then have to do that. Right. That's why, incidentally, back in the old days when I was going to these events, WMAW and ISMAC and whatnot, they would always have me in the first thing Sunday morning slot. Right?
Yeah.
Because they knew that if I was teaching the next morning, I wouldn't get too drunk the night before, I would get to bed early, and I would actually be fit to teach a class the next morning.
Nice.
Right? And there weren't that many other instructors who, well, pretty much none of them were professionals, so understandable, who they could rely on for that. So I got stuck with it. And after about 10 years of this, I said to the organisers, I have done my time and I will not teach on Sunday at all. Take it or leave it. And they were like, well, fair enough, Guy. Actually, yeah, fair enough. And so I was done teaching by Saturday afternoon, and I could get drunk with my friends Saturday night and be a bit groggy the next morning, and it was fine.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's that sort of, you have professional standards, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So
exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely. The other...
Now, I did want to ask you, what is your favourite episode of the show?
Right. I did think about this.
Show.
I did think about this. And I think this question is a lot like asking, which is the best dog? Like, they're all good dogs, right? They're all good dogs.
Okay.
So I'm going to answer a different question. And I'm going to answer... Because there's too many to choose from. What I really like is that you don't know what you don't know. And the shows are full of those little nuggets of things. It's like, oh, that's really interesting. If I can apply it to fencing, then it gets a million more points than anything else. But just sometimes it's just a way that somebody explains something that just makes it click. So the question that I'm going to answer, if that's okay, is the most listened to episode is actually the one with you and Cornelius just completely geeking out about tempo.
Oh, right, okay.
And I was listening to it.
So you listened to it more than once?
Yes, I was listening to it in the car. And because you're also discussing sources that I don't know anything about, with weapons that I don't do. Honestly, you would cry if you saw me with a rapier. It's like fencing loses.
I would cry with joy. I would.
You wouldn't. So at the By the Sword event that Fran puts on a couple of months ago, they have like a mixed steel, and they sort of like roll a dice, and we do, I think there was longsword, saber, which I basically treat like a messer, and rapier. And I'm terrible with a rapier, really, really bad. So I basically did Fiore's sword in one hand.
Okay. That's not quite. Although Calafero says at the end of his book, Il Gran Simulacro, he gives you a secure way to defend yourself against all sorts of blows, and he says to wait in a low quarta, and when they attack, beat it up with prima, and then thrust, which is very similar to what to what Fiore's doing the sword in one hand. Only the sword is pointing forward rather than back at the beginning. Yeah. So I think you probably were channeling Capoferro there.
I will take that from you, Guy. I will take that. So...
Okay. The Cornelius episode is your most listened to.
Yeah, so I was listening to it in the car, which I usually do, and I had to pause it because I'm like, I need to write notes on this. Like, it literally leads to... So I use a system for all of my notes called Rome Research. It's basically like a personal knowledge system. There are other things out there as well, but this is the one I use, and it's basically something you can just pour thoughts into, like written thoughts, and it'll link it together. And the difference is you don't have to have a series of documents that you file away. You can put tags around it. So I used to have my own wiki for things, because I have to keep track of, yes, I use this for sword stuff, but just for, all of these different things going on with business, like marketing, raising money. I've got all of these different resources for the teams, and that's how I manage it. But I manage everything in there. So I was like, I need to write this down. And I'm missing it.
Rome Research.
Rome. So I'll send it to you in the email. I'll send you the link.
Yeah, do. Okay.
But yeah, it's and it's really good for writing. It's really good for writing papers as well, apparently. But yeah, so I was like, I need to stop. I'm not concentrating on the driving here. And I felt like I was missing things. So I had to stop it and go on to like something else, something more frivolous, and then come back to it. So I think I've probably listened to that one about 3 times.
Okay.
But there are other bits.
That's pretty good.
But I write lots and lots of notes on. So all of this amazing wealth of knowledge that everybody brings in from loads of people that I like already know and respect, and then I meet a whole load of other ones on this. So they're all excellent episodes, and I enjoy them all. That's my get out answer.
That's actually a really good answer, because the thing is, like, taking risks is the wrong way to put it, but I don't have a consistent yardstick by which I decide whether somebody should come on the show or not. It's more an instinctive, that person seems like they would have something a bit different to offer, or, I mean, people like that, getting Christian Tober on the show, that's an obvious person to have on, because, he's been at the forefront of the historical martial arts movement for the last 25 years, right? So, obvious candidate. Jessica Finley, another fairly obvious candidate. But finding people who may have only been training for 6 months or a year, but they're doing something interesting with it, like documenting it on YouTube, for instance, or just it's difficult for me to know whether somebody's going to be a good guest or not, and I have absolutely no way of predicting how it's going to be received, because some of my, shall we say, quirkier, nichier, less obviously mainstream historical martial arts popular people have generated the most, oh my God, that was amazing, emails from listeners, right? And some of the obvious heavier hitters have had less obvious effects in terms of, feedback that I receive on the show.
Interesting.
Right? Cornelius was a popular one.
Yeah.
And but that wasn't a standard episode. I didn't actually interview him. He emailed me with a question about tempo.
Yeah.
And I said, look, we should probably discuss this over Zoom or something, because it would be more efficient. Why don't I record it?
Yeah. No, it was so good. And this is...
So I didn't even introduce him properly. I need to get him back on and actually do a proper interview. Yeah,
no, he's great. I trained with him. So in the before times, the event at the Royal Armouries, I was there for that, and I trained in his class, and I really enjoyed it. It was very much a back to basics, like his basics, but just. And I think this is where, when you've studied martial arts for a really long time, you start to really appreciate the nuance. So I will often stop somebody, even when I'm training with it, or I'll pull over the instructor and go, "You did that different. What can you do that on me so I can feel what the difference is?" And I'll try and get them to describe it. And it might work for me, it might not. But the fact that it's different and new, I'm like, why are you doing it like that? There's a reason. Like, do you find it works here? But so I try and unpick it. So yeah, I really like, and that's why I buy as much as I can and try and absorb it, because you don't know what you don't know. So yeah it's really good. I enjoy it a lot.
And that actually goes to the diversity thing you were talking about with choosing the people to work in a startup.
Yeah.
right? Because if all of you are, I don't know, have computer science degrees from Princeton,
Yeah.
right? Then there may be diversity of other things, but there isn't going to be a diversity of education.
Yeah.
And so you're going to be missing certain things that you don't know you're missing.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And quite often, I think we're slowly becoming more aware about the importance of like diversity in all sorts of different ways. One of the ones that seems to get missed is, like we touched on it, like age. Because it feels like very much a young person thing, and a young person. It's like, no, you need somebody to do a job. What is that job? Do you want the best person to do that? Who's the best person to do that? Somebody that's been doing it their entire life. And then you start to bring in different perspectives about how you don't know that you're accidentally alienating people, like with your products. So like it's that wealth. And I think we're better as humans. We're better when we work together, right? And that needs to include as many people as possible and diverse opinions. As long as they're not offensive, but I feel like, and I am aware offensive is the eye of the beholder. But as long as you're trying to be a good human, trying to be good to other humans, like I feel that sort of diversity, like that's how we've done amazing things as a mammal. Like, why would we then want to pigeonhole that?
Yeah, I mean, team building is the original force multiplier.
Yeah.
Two people together can do much more than two people separately.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, I had people installing solar power into my house 2 days ago, right? And the electrician who was doing it, there's tricky electrician stuff I know nothing about. And he called one of his colleagues who came and helped for a couple of hours. And it basically shaved about 4 hours off the total time, even if you include like the extra man hours of having that extra person there for 2 hours, right? It shaved hours off the job because doing it together was so much faster than doing it on his own.
Yeah.
Right? And it's true for all sorts of things. Like the first step in any campaign is recruit allies.
Yeah, totally. And sometimes it can be the smallest amount of commitment of just go and find somebody that's done that before and just go and talk to them. Find 3. Right? Because you don't want to conflict, like there's opinion and there's fact, but like what happened when you did this? What did you learn? And just get that insight, and that gives you a massive head start as well. But being able to tap into those different networks and get as much information as possible, and that works as well in the fencing school, right? So one of the really nice things that we've been able to do as we grow is to when we get into free fencing and things like that, we all feed back to each other, because as we all get better, and I've started to encourage people to film themselves and look back so that they can start to develop this part of the brain that went, what just happened? And they're sort of like, yeah, but then they might beat me. I'm like, yeah, then you'll have to find a new way to beat them, and then we all get better.
Exactly. And, like fencing memory is a skill that can be trained.
Yeah.
Right?
Really important one. Really important one.
Yeah. Because if you don't know what just happened, you can't fix it for next time.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, I have a couple of questions, as you know, as a listener of the show. What is the best idea you haven't acted on?
This was really difficult for me because I do really small. Yeah, you really do act on stuff. So the thing that I haven't acted on yet is I've been thinking about putting out my content of the stuff that we've been thinking about in the school. And the reason that I haven't done it is because I'm trying to work out the way to frame that so people realise this is a constant work in progress. I'm not saying I've done this and this is done. So there's that imposter syndrome of like, I'm not saying this is the way. I'm saying here's some stuff that's interesting. What do you think? And the other reason is I don't want to have to deal with unhelpful opinions from the internet. Constructive feedback's great, and I don't care how direct that is, but just people just being awful humans because they're sat at the other end of the keyboard. So I need to find a balance for that. So when I find a balance, I will start to do stuff.
I have a pretty clear sort of set of principles for that. Firstly, I don't do social media at all. I pay somebody to do it for me. So when you see something of mine posted on social media, it's not me doing it myself. Yeah. It's somebody else who I am paying to do it because they don't have skin in the game. And sometimes people say nasty things about some of the things I do, and that's just part of it. Yeah. And they're not offensive to the person I'm paying because it's not aimed at them.
Yeah.
Right? Because, you know, one nasty comment can completely derail your day.
Oh, yeah.
When it comes to things like book reviews, if my target readers are telling me this is exactly what they wanted and giving me 5 stars or whatever, then I know the book is good. And if I get a 1-star or 2-star review, I know I have sold a book to the wrong person, right? It's a marketing problem. Yeah. Maybe I should have been clearer in the blurb. Like somebody bought one of my workbooks, which clearly states it has, you know, space for writing notes and whatnot.
Yeah.
And he gave it a 1-star review because it's got all this blank space in it. It's like, it's a fucking workbook. You fucking bellend, was my emotional response. But really, what that was is the blurb needed to be clearer. This is a workbook. It is not dense text.
Sorry, that's right? My dog being really excited.
Okay.
Sorry, yeah, and
did you? I think your doorbell just went.
It did, yeah. Sorry.
It's very exciting. New people, ruff.
Yeah, but like,
very exciting.
And I bought the workbook, and because again, you don't know what you don't know, but bearing in mind, one of my sort of things here is like, how do we get more people involved in this? Like, this is a really good. People think about like. I think they make the mistake of calling them basics. They're not basics, they're fundamental. The fundamentals. Right. You cannot understand too much the fundamentals. So I will, and I will read everything. And the way that people explain it, I'm like, do you know what? That's really useful. But sometimes, just like it was in the Cornelius episode, just the way that somebody else explains their understanding of a principle, just go, oh, it sounds really obvious now you said it like that. Now I feel like an idiot. But like, it just really helps you, right? And then sometimes if you're trying to explain that to somebody else in a class or something like that, you've got that to rely on, this mental models.
Okay, as a tech person, what do you think of the workbook format with the QR codes linking to videos and stuff? Does that work?
I was very excitedly told Bob that it had arrived and that there were so many good ideas that we needed to be heavily inspired by.
Okay.
So for years we've been trying to, the QR codes have like appeared everywhere. And I think that lockdown was the time of QR codes.
Yeah.
And some of the issue with technology is timing. Yeah. And like, there's nothing really new under the sun. There's just, we just tweak it a bit, right? And we just find different ways to solve that problem. I thought that was brilliant. I thought it was really, really good. Really good.
So it works?
I really, I have tried it. I think it's great. I'm very dyslexic. And so anything where I don't have to type in a URL is great. Having said that, my phone is actually quite good at reading text now and translating. Okay. That's incredible. That's a thing. I thought I really liked it.
Okay, good. Because I, for some reason, the workbook format that I created, started with the rapier ones, hasn't really taken off. I'm not seeing anybody else doing it, and pretty much nobody is buying it. It's like my regular books outsell the workbooks 10 to 1.
Interesting. But the other thing that I really liked is you had the right and left-handed version. I thought that was great.
Well, if you write with a pen, you need to be able to do that, I think. And it's a bit shitty if you're a left-hander having to kind of write over on the wrong page. It's just,
no, I thought it was a great idea. But yeah, I mean, the only way you can do it is test these things, right? That's why.
But here's the thing, right? And this is where I am not very businesslike. Okay, from an economic standpoint, I should bin the left-handed versions because they do not make back the extra costs in layout are not made back in profits from sales, right? It costs me quite a lot of money to get. Basically, it's getting the book laid out twice, right? And the extra layout costs, which are considerable, does not come back in sales. But I don't care
Yeah.
Because it's the right thing to do.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. And I know that embedding video into workbook is a better way of communicating movement than having static pictures.
Yeah.
And everyone has a smartphone pretty much. And if you can point it at the page and see the video, you'll get the movement much better than if I type it all out extra times.
Yeah.
Right. So I know that it's right. I know that it's better than what came before.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to have to quietly and patiently wait for the historical martial arts world to wake up and realise I'm a fucking genius and do it.
Yeah, but this is the thing. So, but it's the same. I guess it's the same reason you do the podcast, right? You don't do the podcast to make money.
It doesn't make any money. It costs me money.
But doing the podcast will help you make money. If you know what I mean. So,
yeah, indirectly it might.
It totally will. Absolutely, because
it hasn't yet.
No, you just can't attribute it yet.
No. Okay, podcast has been running for almost exactly 2 years now. Okay, my income from books and courses went up significantly in 2020 before the podcast came out, before I even had the idea for the podcast, right? And it has stayed pretty much constant since then. So the time and work I'm putting into the podcast is not coming back in terms of book sales and whatever. But I don't do it for that. I do it because basically I read the book, Invisible Women, Caroline Criado Perez. And it was like, fuck, I wasn't aware. And so what can I do to, improve diversity in historical martial arts? Well, I have a platform. Let's get lots of people who aren't me onto it. How do I do that? Podcast seems like a good idea. Let's give it a go.
Yeah.
Right. That was the plan.
But if you think about it, in cold business terms, no, it's not. But what are you doing? You're widening out people that know about HEMA.
Yeah.
So all of these other people that you're getting in, all of their friends and family now probably understand that what they're doing. All of their audience
also,
now find out HEMA's a thing.
Not all of my guests are sword people.
Exactly. So what was the really good one with the 2 stage combatant?
Oh, yeah.
That was a really good one.
Yeah, I'm blanking on the name. Rachel and... Yes. I'll put it in the show notes. And again, but they're stage combat people, and they have just a different take on the whole how do you train people with swords
exactly
thing.
Yeah.
Actually, some of my favourites have been with people who have nothing to do with swords at all, like Katie Bowman, right, the biomechanist, right? She doesn't swing swords particularly. She plays swords with her son sometimes, but that's about it.
Yeah.
Right.
But just as the same way that I found out about, HEMA because there was the Hotspur School of Defence, because I watched a documentary on history. Oh,
there you go. Yeah, okay.
This is what so just widening it out. So as far as I'm concerned, everybody that finds out that HEMA is a thing, because it's a conversation starter, right? Did you know there's some people with swords? I met this woman the other day with a sword, and she just talked to me about swords. And then it might not be this generation. It might be the next generation of kids that know they can play with swords.
As grown-ups.
When they have disposable income and no one can tell them they can't buy all the swords they need.
Exactly. Or even all the swords they want. A reason not the need,
Well, I'm not sure they're different, are they?
No. There are swords that I want and swords that I need. Right? I do not need a beautiful, big, sharp, glorious, messery type thing that I got given by my students in Seattle recently, a couple of years ago actually. It was just a gift, and if I'd needed it, I would have bought it as a necessary. I have sharp swords that will do the thing, but actually, if there was one sword that I was going to save in a fight, it would probably be that one.
Interesting,
right? Yeah. Although I don't teach that weapon, and the swords I technically need are like my long sword, rapier, small sword, sword and buckler, sword. I need those because I use them regularly in my job. I don't need my copy of Capoferro.
Yes.
Right, but I'm a Capoferro man, Yeah, I've written books and workbooks on his system. I wanted a first edition from 1610, and I finally got one. And I don't need it. I have scans already. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think
it's different. Yeah.
when I'm using the word need, I mean like need it rather than require.
Okay, yeah, fair. All right.
Because it feels like if that's the thing you're going to grab in a house fire, I feel like that's something you need, right? That's the heart wants what the heart wants, guy.
That's very true. Yeah, and of course, the wife and children are already out of the house.
Oh, of course, yeah.
Yeah, and I wouldn't go back into a burning building to save a book or a sword. I wouldn't do it because I'm a parent and I have to stay alive for my children.
Yeah, but if on the way, maybe the kids could pick up those things on the way out, that would really help.
Actually, I should keep those things in the children's bedrooms.
Yeah. Definitely.
I think the children might have something to say about that. Okay, now my last question. Okay, somebody gives you £1 million to spend improving historical martial arts worldwide. How would you spend it?
So, I have done a couple of tournaments, but I'm not very good at them. And I'm not very good at them because the type of fencing I enjoy is more like Blossfechten. It's the like, I could have hit you here, I'm going to move away. It's like, so I do much, much better at that. And I feel like I would like to develop a fencing rule set that doesn't reward force escalation.
Yeah.
Because I think there's only one way that ends, and it's not going to be nice. Like, it just gets more and more and more.
I have an idea. I just had an idea. Tell me what you think. Okay. A tournament sword that has a connection between the blade and the hilt, where too much force is used, it breaks off in your hand.
Oh, so... Yeah,
so it's
breakable
not,
ones. Yeah.
So
okay.
it's not like the point breaks off and it's dangerous. It's literally the blade falls off the hilt if too much force is used. So let's say there's a friable glue joint or whatever, and it's a terrible sword for actual sword fighting, but it would reward placing blows, parrying, whatever. But if the force goes past a certain point, your sword breaks and you lose.
So it's funny you should say that, because that actually happened. It actually happened a couple of weeks ago in class. I wasn't there, we were away, and it was the first time they'd used a steel, and they used one of Bob's really old ones. I think it was a first generation, is it the Hamwise? Anyway, it's really, really old one.
Yeah.
Really, really, really old one. And literally it wasn't even any, he just basically put something that was like, it's either a parry or a displacement. Let's say it was a displacement. And the whole sword, basically, it just went straight through it. The blade fell off. The pommel fell off. And in this comic timing. So we have one, is what I'm saying.
Okay.
And yeah, it was very effective. But yeah, so I do have some ideas, and unfortunately they are mostly tech solutions. But, just things like judging. Like, judging is a skill that people have to pick up. It's very, very taxing. I've done very, very little of it. It's very, very difficult to work out what's actually happened. So, So I have this idea that we could use, again, because I work a lot in startups and I've been talking about physical objects and things like that. If we could have sensors like they do in like the film industry that would give you a 3D model in real time so you can see what actually happens. Number one, that makes replays possible so that actually people outside the HEMA community can see what on earth that we're trying to do. But also it would really help say, oh, you're doing this cut like this. You're doing this cut like you're actually moving in this way, moving your body in this way. And so I would really like something that would tell me what was going on that we could use in a fencing tournament way, a light touch, to say, well, what did happen there? Because it's impossible to tell.
Well, it's not impossible. It's just a high level skill. Like when I was taught fencing in the 80s, like sport fencing, when we did kind of formal fencing, there were 7 people involved. There was the 2 fencers. They each had 2 judges. Was it 7? No. So that's 2 fencers, 2 judges each. So that's 6. And then there's the president. So yeah, it was 7 people, right? And the 2 judges watch over their fencer's shoulder and look for hits on the other person. and the two judges on the other side look over their fencer's shoulder and for hits on the other fencer, and the president's job is to decide what happened and award hits, taking into account what the judges have said. Yeah. And it's a really good system if you're on a strip. It's much more difficult if you are moving around. But I was taught that. And by going through the judging process many, many, many times and doing the presiding with my coach standing next to me, seeing how I did, I was literally taught it as a skill. And so, we do similar things in my school where we set up formal free fencing and we have judging, but we also have exercises for developing fencing memory. I mean, you read my book, so you've got it in there, right? I won't bore the listener with them now, but but your idea strikes me as something that it would be useful to the historical fencers, but it's most useful to the audience, especially the untrained audience. So that would be a big step towards getting historical martial arts more widely known and understood.
Yeah. So if you have, I think there's several. So again, I want to be focused on the problem. There are loads of different solutions to this. So one of them is maybe just having a formal way of training judges and funding them, because it's difficult, right? So at tournaments, it's volunteer led, if you have trained people that get reimbursed for their time or whatever, that would be interesting. But so in order to get HEMA more widely known, if you can make it something that the audiences can understand from a distance, that's really interesting. If you could have demonstrations and things like that where people can understand what's happening. And I think that's probably where the effectual rules, they started to become more flamboyant because they're showing people what's happening. Their hits are different. And that's very difficult at the moment when you're rewarding head hits. And it's very easy to see those because, for instance, I was at a tournament a while ago and I had my messer against somebody's arm. And then they just powered through and got a headshot. Now, that would be impossible if my messer was on their arm, because in order to do that, their arm would have fallen off. Yeah. But it's very difficult in the moment with the rule sets to be able to do that. So I think there's parts of the problem. I think it's a complex problem, and not everyone will agree with me that they think it needs changing, but I think there's room for something else, I guess.
But also be really useful as a teaching tool and a coaching tool. Because I'm often teaching people over the internet, and it's bloody hard in 2D. Yeah. Right? But if I had a 3D model of what they're doing, I mean, I can see pretty well. But they can't necessarily see me that well. Yeah.
Right? And this is something that I learned in Aikido as well. When you can, sometimes the instructor doesn't know what they're doing right, because they've never done it wrong. That thing that you're doing wrong, they've never done wrong. Yeah. So it can be very, very subtle. So if there's a way of, you've aligned your skeleton slightly differently, right? And that's something that you get through feeling. And you can't, again, when you're working remotely with people, you can't get that feeling. That's so important through a sword. You can't get the feeling of what it feels like that tells you what the solution is that you've trained in. So if I do, that's maybe a project that I'm thinking about. But again, with my startup hat on, how many people would pay for that? I don't know.
Probably. But okay, the point of the question is somebody gives you the money. Somebody gives you the money. You don't have to make a business out of it. You don't have to make the money back. They just give you the money.
Sorry, the dog's barking.
That's all right.
He stopped. Yes, it's a bad habit with startups. How is this going to make money?
Well, yeah, and it could, because honestly, but here's the problem with a lot of this stuff is, I did a bunch of motion capture for this Saudi startup thing in Seattle a while ago, 6, 7, 8 years ago. I can't remember exactly. But they did motion capture on me doing some various things. And then when I went back 6 months later to do some more for them, and they showed me what they'd done with the previous stuff, I was like, that's not me.
Interesting.
Because it was moving all wrong. And they said, the problem is, Guy, when you move, it doesn't look like anything.
What?
No, it's true. No, they're absolutely true. When I move, it doesn't look like anything. Because the sword goes from where it is to where I want it to go, and there's nothing in between.
Oh, I see. Okay.
It looks like I'm just standing there, and then suddenly my sword is over there, and there's nothing really happens. Players want to see the movement, and it's very inefficient, and it's very shit, and it doesn't hit very hard.
Yeah.
Right? So the problem that we're going to deal with there, if we have these three-dimensional models doing these things, is when it's really good, it doesn't look like anything.
Yes. Yeah. Indeed. Yeah.
So we have to educate people to appreciate efficiency over ostentatious, inefficient movement.
Yeah. But did they put sensors on the sword as well?
Honestly, I don't remember.
Because that's the other thing, right? So that if you put sensors on the sword, you can see the path of the sword.
Yeah.
And the path of where it would have touched a limb or something else. Mm-hmm. So to be able to track that, and then I was telling Bob about this idea, and he went, "You've basically just invented electric sport fencing."
Yeah, pretty much.
But over-engineered it. I think that's what I've brought to this. But yeah, that is at some point I might start playing around with some prototypes for that. But if someone wants to give me £1 million, that's way easier.
Well, you never know. The podcast doesn't make money for me, as we've established, but it might make money for you, and that would be great. Brilliant. Well, thank you so much for joining me today, Joe. It's been lovely to meet you.
Thank you. You too. Yeah, we'll have to meet in real person at some point.
Yes, let's do that.
Thanks for listening. You can find the episode show notes at swordschool.com/podcast, where you will find transcriptions, photos, videos, and links for this episode. You can find a direct link to the show notes for this episode in the description. Join us next week for another cracking conversation. See you then.